We are here today to begin a promising week of lectures and workshops for a great international collaboration of educational institutions under the name Future Text. We are honored by the presence of several colleagues from the Polish-Japanese Academy in Warsaw, and we are looking forward in the coming days to reciprocate their warm hospitality when we visited Warsaw last April. The program of the Future Text will include 2 days of lectures by scholars from a variety of fields, 4 different workshops, and at its final day, on Friday, a small exhibition of the works of the students, together with a roundtable discussion with some of the leading designers on their views concerning the future. We are grateful to all of them for their willingness to be here and to impart their wisdom to us and to our students. Events like this not only provide new windows of knowledge to all, they also afford the opportunity for young people to learn on the fly, as it were, some special aspects of their chosen profession. Therefore, speaking on behalf of my colleagues in the organizing committee, Eleni Martini, Katerina Donaki, and Eva Masura, I would like to sincerely thank our very dedicated students, Maria Bizimi, Irini Daskalaki, Thanasi Koutsogyanni, Karolina Knapik, Sofia Korfiati, Thoma Liolio, Ivi Papakosma και Νικολέτα Τουρλούκη, who volunteered and worked hard to organize the logistics of the Future Text Week in Athens and develop its visual communication. Now, with no further ado, I would like to invite Professor and Dean of the School in Warsaw, Eva Sataleka, the spirit and the heart of this program, to give us a brief description of the Future Text and open today's sessions. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you, George, so much for giving us opportunity to become a partner in this very international project for which we invited together schools from Japan, USA and Europe, from Germany, Ireland and Greece. And we are going to learn a bit and to deliberate a bit together about the future of text-based communication. I believe that Greece is the best point to start, because without the Greeks we will never communicate using text. So this is a good point for beginning this kind of deliberation as about the innovating thinking and innovations in communication at all, because we as a European civilization have adapted for the Greek culture, and I think we can still learn a lot from the past, thinking about future. I hope we all will enjoy our company and work together, and then in result we will meet again in October 2020 in Warsaw to sum what we achieved during this 2 years long project, which we are going to continue.
Super.
Thank you.
Right. So, we begin our session with my, I hope, shortish lecture on the early Greek printing types. In our modern world, texts written by hand and printed books have come to be looked upon as a totally distinct areas and entities. And it is very difficult to realize the scale in the state of things when books were only written by hand. The profusion of the wireless digital computers and teletexting has taken the younger generations even further from the culture and the art of the book, not only as a mechanical copy of a given text, but also as an object of craftsmanship achieved by the masterful collaboration of many skilled and inspired individuals, such as type cutters, typesetters, wood engravers, printers, paper makers, and bookbinders. The world which we inhabit today quickly leaves behind Gutenberg's legacy. The printed book is no longer the vital repository of to store the humanities' knowledge, and it will soon become purely an object of art for collectors. But the written word has for a long time been the cornerstone of visual communication, and as such, it will continue to play a vital role in the transfer of information and of literature as well. That's an important factor which we need to keep in mind in order to understand the design progress of the Greek alphabet and the other alphabets as well. So, before we deal with the Greek printing types, let's track at a quick pace to the written Greek letters of the past. Antiquity bequeathed to the Byzantine Empire an alphabet of 24 majuscule letters, but the scribes were soon freed from the rough and unyielding surface of the papyrus scrolls to the smooth and pliable parchment from the skin of the cows. Have a look of the past in antiquity. Of course, what is left is mostly hard rock, which letters were carved, but from that we understand the way the ancient Greeks perceived their alphabets and tried to emulate it in any surface. More of that, obviously, a lot of you will see at our visit in the Epigraphical Museum later this week. This is an ideal, so to speak, alphabet designed, but it follows the rules and the styles of the curvers of antiquity. So, the factor that they start writing by the Roman times in parchment instead of the papyrus, it will help them and enhance the flow of the hands and increase the speed of writing significantly. As a result, the timid breaking of the rules, which we can observe during the late Roman period, was accelerated, thus paving the way to complete the transformation of the Greek letters from majuscule forms to minuscule by the end of the 8th century. You can see how the written letters are on the papyrus and how gradually they break the two-line rule from top and base. Again here, this transformation becomes more and more evident. And the scribes of the Byzantine era, which they now write on parchment. And you can see slowly how they dare break the rules. This is, of course, something that's been happening over decades and centuries, not days or months, as we are quite accustomed today to happen. Things accelerate a lot. So by the end of the 8th century, we end up with this transformation from majuscule or capital letters to minuscule or call them small letters. This path was not dissimilar to the formation of the minuscule hand in Western Europe as well, and its establishment by imperial decree during the reign of Carlomagnus in the 9th century. The Carolinian minuscule evolved mostly into the highly structured Gothic hands, while the Byzantine scribes reveled more and more into the flamboyant and unrestricted fancy of their art. So you can compare the two civilizations and their understanding or aesthetic paradigm they would be using. So for the remaining of the Middle Ages, this process was further developed in the East with strong influences from the Arabic calligraphy, resulting into a riot of shapes and flourishes that formed ligatures and abbreviations of 2, 3, or 4 letters, and many common words and names. These are the monocondyli, meaning the signatures of important people, usually archbishops or dukes and emperors. So you can see how far away the Greek writing system goes compared to the Western equivalent. Now, coming to the end of the Middle Ages and starting the modern period of the Renaissance, it is when Gutenberg conceived and materialized his idea of reusable metal types for text printing in Mainz, in Germany, by the middle of the 15th century, when the textura Gothic was the principal choice of the scribes and the readers alike. On your left, you see a written codex of the time, and on the right, you see the first printed Bible by Gutenberg. So you can see how similar the both hands look, or at least how much Gutenberg troubled himself to look like a codex of the time. This consequently informed his design choice of the type for his famous printed Bible, and the relatively simplicity of the prevailing vertical strokes executed by the pen of the scribe while he writes, and their dense positioning next to each other made easier for the conceptualization of the solution. In other words, placing little metal sticks one after the other together. Although here we can have just a brief look at the technical procedures, how he would cut a punch, a steel punch, which then would be banked into a copper matrix before it would go to the little mold as you see the operator holding in his hand, and pour the molten lead to produce the type at the bottom of the right, which there would be the types that the typesetters would typeset the texts. So, although he designed and produced a number of slightly variant characters, so the printed page would look like as being handwritten. In effect, though, printing was born when the rising social need for multiple copies of any text merged with the uncomplicated, almost mechanical motion of the prevailing writing style of the time. This is the crux of the issue in terms of design and technological innovation, and it should also be well understood before we begin our probing into the early Greek printing types. As printing know-how broke away from mines and the new art was brought south of the Alps to meet the gathering pace of the Italian Renaissance and the humanism, the need to incorporate Greek passages in the printed books became apparent. Ancient Greek texts on philosophy, theater, history, science, or religion were extremely valuable to the awakening intellect of Europe, and many scholars had come to realize that Latin translations were scarce and often a poor substitute for the wealth of ideas and the beauty of expression that the Greek originals contained. Having access to the Greek writings and learning to speak the language and write it were the only secure way to accuracy and profound knowledge. Thus, it's not coincidental that in Europe, the second written language to make it to the new cutting-edge technology of printing was Latin's older sister, Greek. At that period, from the 1460s and 70s, few Greek scholars were available to consult the publishers, and virtually no Greek engraver was yet trained into the complex work of type cutting and type design. Therefore, what the first German, French, and Italian type cutters did to solve the problem was to reduce it to meet their modest requirements. After having a cursory look at any Greek manuscript, this is from the 13th century, or the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. Of course, these are not canons. It could be many variations, but it'll just give you an idea of the complexity of the Greek writing of the time. So, after having this cursory look, even a non-specialist will surmise that the intricate and full of labyrinthine tangles and flourishes of the Greek alphabet, or Greek hands, bear little resemblance to the monotonous rhythm of vertical strokes found in the Gothic scripts and those who inaugurated the printing process. This incomprehensible maze of convoluted strokes and diacritics had to be simplified. So what they did was to throw away all this historical visual baggage of the Greek alphabet and isolate as best as they could the 24 characters. So, regardless of the technical expertise in type cutting, the result of printed Greek passages using this practice must look very peculiar to any Greek reader at that time. Yet, for the time being, it answered the modern demands of the Italian publishing market. This early route, which Robert Proctor referred to it as Greco-Latin types, was overtaken by new solutions from renowned type cutters and printers such as Wendelin de Spira and Nicolas Janchon in Venice a little bit later. You can see on the slide these rudimentary ways that Greek type appears in Latin text in the first decades of printing in Europe. Again, no diacritics, no connections, simplicity to avoid the problem. So here we have the first attempt by Sanson and Daspira, the famous printers in Venice, to start emulate a bit of more common Greek writing. This is pretty much the culmination of style that most of the Latin typographers would use for most of the 15th century. It culminated when, in Spain, the powerful Cardinal Jiménez de Cisneros at the University of Alcalá de Henares decided to publish the first polyglot Bible. That means the Bible in the many sacred languages that it was written. It was decided that for the volume of the New Testament, the Greek text should be set with a new Greek font based on the previous experiences, and it was in fact the first monotone Greek text that appeared printed, foreshadowing the developments of the 20th century, the late 20th century, going back to the monotonic style of writing by about 500 years, give or take. Between 1474 and 75, we find the first editions entirely in Greek, though not conclusively dated, by Thomas Ferrandus in Brescia and a grammar by Manuel Chrysoloras in Vicenza. You can see the text along with the Latin translation and also a detail to understand the way they would write or actually cut the type. And this is by Damilas. In these editions, we find the first clear instances where the characters started tentatively to follow the older Greek writing tradition. That backward look, I would call it, which included a fair number of ligatures and alternative designs of certain letters, including a full set of capitals and all the accents and the diacritics. Typography, through the introduction of Greek printing and writing, had been shoved abruptly away from its comfort zone. As Renaissance progressed, new problems arose waiting for new solutions. Until the mid-1480s, the only Greek book published in Venice was another edition of the Erotemata by Chrysoloras, based again on the monoline class which he brought from Vicenza. But in 1486, we observe a flashing trajectory that has no parallel in early typography, and unexpectedly, without any previous presence, two Cretan men of the cloth, Laonikos and Alexandros, attempted and more significantly materialized the unthinkable. A full-scale Byzantine hand composed of no less than 1,300 swords, of either single or ligatured characters that contained, one can imagine, many type cases to use. Spectacularly, not only in terms of the overall visual result, but mainly in the daring ambition and innovative application in type-making boundaries, this early in the development of the typographic craft. Sadly, these early editions did not make a publishing success at the time. And the two innovators slipped back to oblivion, but they were the catalysts for pointing to different alternative solutions, thinking out of the box, as it were, in terms of type cutting and typesetting norms. They blazed a new path of Greek printing at the time, and the precedent opened the way for Aldous Manutios to gamble and succeed in his publishing ambitions a decade later. Another eccentric experiment came from Florence, where the scholar Ioannos Laskaris attempted to bring into play an inscriptional form of the Greek capital letters, which Lorenzo de Alopa printed the classical text of Apollonius Rhodius. You can see he's using only capital letters, and bigger and a smaller one, so they try to emulate as much as they can the ancient epigraphical style, again stricken by the ancient civilization, and try to emulate it in every possible way. Although his model, including awkwardly sitting accents above the capital vowels, did not prove successful as a publishing venture, it surely influenced Aldous, a friend of Laskaris, to incorporate a form of ancient Greek inscriptional majuscules to his first Greek editions, and thus establishing, since then, to all of us, that betrothal of the ancient Greek capitals with Byzantine minuscules. Now, we're entering into the thick of the problem. Aldous Manutius, the famous Italian publisher and innovator, he made a bold decision to enter into the publishing business in Venice and concentrate in Greek editions, and that was ambitious but well prepared. Always surrounded by an exceptional circle of Greek scholars, and in collaboration with a gifted type cutter, Francesco Grifo da Bologna, Aldous managed to alter the course of printing history both in Greek and in Latin typography. Aldous opted to model the Greek characters of his first editions not on the notion of the backward look, what the Byzantines did centuries ago, but on the handwriting of his contemporary scribes. A daring step that somehow caught on, while coupled with his publishing success of the complete corpus of the ancient Greek literature, it redefined and in the end established this novel route for the Greek books in all of Europe. For his first Greek font, as we can see, Grifo, his type cutter, was asked to follow the hand of the scribe Emmanuel Roussotas for the minuscule letters, and to incorporate a set of majuscules or capitals on the line of the inscriptional letters and models that Ioannos Laskaris had already suggested. During Aldous' ascendance to universal success, in the later years of the 15th century, another Cretan, before we go into that, let's see a few more of his type. This is the first. He designed and used 4 different types. This is the first one, of which actually he would set the diacritics independent of the letters themselves, which of course made it easier for the type cutter to do the job, but raised hell for the typesetter to try to arrange little diacritics on top of letters. So that's why this effort within a couple of years was abandoned. You can see here a sample of the type and a sample of Roussotas' writing so you can compare how they start picking up the details of the contemporary Greek scribes. This is again the digitized first alphabet. These are the lowercase and variations, as you can see. And a very small sample of the ligatures, hundreds of them, yeah? So you can understand the difficulty, but also the resolution to make Greek look like what they were used to read on those days. This is the second type he designed, which was used mostly for scholia, that is going around the main text. And again, you can see how he's trying to, by lowering, making it smaller to make it be more profitable in a way to fit more text within the page. That's his third type, which most likely was based on Marcus Musurus's writing, Ductus. Again, you can see and compare. And finally, his fourth and last design he used, it was based on his own writing hand, Manutius style. So this is also one of that went around Europe with his publications and also influenced the way other type cutters would cut type in the rest of Europe. So, during Aldous' ascendance to universal success in the last years of the 15th century, another Cretan attempt was undertaken for the design of a new Greek type and the publication of a series of books by Nikolaos Vlastos, a bookseller and stationer in Venice, and a young scribe cum type cutter, Zacharias Kalliergis, both Cretans. The first edition, Etymologicum Magnum, I would call it in Latin, Etymologico Megan is in Greek, appeared in 1499, and within the next year, 3 more books followed on ancient authors. The overall book design was modeled in the Byzantine tradition, but the type in a more contemporary style. Again, you can see Byzantine capitals, not ancient Greek capitals. So he maintains the tradition in all aspects of the book. The lowercase type, simplified. But then again, hundreds and hundreds of ligatures and abbreviations. Again, a very small sample here. So this ends pretty much the Italian scene, and we enter a broader picture how Greek typography now starts traveling northwards, and France has become the new center of political dominance in Western Europe by the early 16th century, or at least trying to. And as humanism and the Renaissance spread northwards, Paris was making a serious effort to emulate, then assimilate, and finally surpass the Italian dominance in scholarship and the arts. Geoffroy Tory, the famous designer, was instrumental in introducing Aldous' choices in type, both in the Roman resurrection of the Carolinian legacy and his precedent of modeling Greek type after fine contemporary scribes. Concerning the latter, when the Royal Library needed to reorganize and expand its volumes in Paris, Angelos Vergikios, another Cretan, renowned as scholar and calligrapher, was called from Italy to do the job. Oh, here I forgot to show you that the Kalieri's type was actually on a project in the last decade. We tried to emulate and create the actual punches and matrices and type to see how an early Greek typographer would work under those conditions. And also typeset some of his text in order to study the ways that early typographers worked. Going back to Argelos Vergikios, this is one of his handwritten texts as scribe. And he collaborated closely with Robert Estienne, the famous French typographer and scholar, and with Claude Garamond, the best able designer, type cutter in France and probably in Europe at that time, was chosen to collaborate with Vergikios to produce a Greek type that would be used by the Imperial French library and printing shop. Here we can see a page, some details, and a few pictures of the actual punches that were cut by Claude Garamond. Of course, Vergikios would be there constantly suggesting, correcting, helping him to bring his exuberant designs and writing into the form of a metal, little, minute punch that would create the text eventually. Again, digitized, the capitals, full ancient design coming from Renaissance conceptions of Greek capitals. In the lower case, Byzantine in style. Again, a very small sample of the over 800 different ligatures that comprised the whole set. And Garamond cut 3 sizes of this type, all different in a way, but again, comprising what by then and until now we would call the Grec du Roi, the letters of the imperial printing shop of the French king. There were numerous imitations, and subsequently they remained the principal model for any new attempt to cut Greek type for 200 years. They became the norm. They are the paradigm how Greek looks for 200 years in Greek editions in Italy, in France, in Germany, in the Low Countries, and in England, and some in Spain as well. So until the second part of the 18th century, when new artistic standards and fresh priorities led to the abandonment of the Byzantine tradition, and especially the use of ligatures and abbreviations, and to a new path of modernist simplicity. You can see here type set in the 18th century where consciously the printers in England, in Germany, in France, in Italy, they avoid using abbreviations. So, with that new idea, the bridge with the past is severed. If a new person learns to read Greek in mainly the 19th century, they would never understand and be able to read the books of the past. So since the middle of the 19th century, this typographic uniformity and simplicity has certainly been instrumental in lifting the newly formed Greek state, from its medieval past under the Ottoman rule, and it allowed Greek society to catch up with the rest in the fast-pacing European modernity, including the marvels of the industrial age, the typesetting machines, linotype, monotype, and all of the technology that ushered the global explosion of publishing during the 20th century. Again, you see the Didot paradigm, which has become the norm in Greek type since the beginning of the 19th century until pretty much today. Again, simplicity, 24 letters, 24 capitals and 24 lowercase, just make with a few accents the whole of the typesetter's case. Easy to set, easy to multiply, and easy to spread throughout the newly formed Greek state. So what of the future then? Now that we have entered a new era, that of the digital revolution, do we still need the absolute letter conformity that typographers have worshipped since Gutenberg? What if a degree of individuality can be reintroduced into the mix? We certainly have the technology to accommodate it. Perhaps we should return back to the Byzantine writing masters and pick up a few ideas. Maybe some soft ligatures, legible to all, would resume a playful note and brighten our digital communication. You see how by just connecting letters, you don't lose legibility, you just bring a level of individuality according to the user. This is a typeset like that, and you can see the used connected letters. Or even here, you can see innovative ways of combining letters together. Even using times, I made a just quick, fast experiment. You can see again how connected letters could brighten up or offer an alternate vision to how we use type or lettering in the future. The participants of the workshop in the next few days will tackle these intriguing ideas. Indeed, the future could be shaped by looking carefully at our long-forgotten past. Thank you.